Morning. I'll read an extract from my short story, uh, Tuesdays at 4. Okay, it's a glorious Sunday morning here. Helen Alderson Brown settled back into the satin-covered pillows and smiled at the dazzling light pouring in to the tall Georgian windows of her bedroom. Rarely did the sun fail to lift her spirits. Life at 80, she told herself, was not what she had always feared, for to her surprise, the days drifted along very pleasantly indeed. Life had certainly been good to her, better than anyone could have imagined, considering the closeted childhood she had subjected to on her father's estate in Meath, and the strict routine of this awful boarding school tucked away in the wilds of Connemara. The finishing school in Switzerland had been her salvation, bringing her, as it did, into contact with the outside world. The behaviour of the other girls, as with their grown-up ideas, their cigarettes and constant talk of secret boyfriends, had shocked her at first, but she quickly adapted and was soon accepted as an equal. What would she be like now if her parents hadn't sent her there, she mused, as she settled herself more comfortably in the bed. She wouldn't have met Stephanie, for a start. Dear, dear Stephanie. Stephanie had a sharp, intelligent mind and knew everything that was worth knowing. Upper-class prejudice drove her up the walls. Helen chuckled to herself, remembering Stephanie's first evening in Meath and the shocked expression on her mother's face as she went into graphic details of venereal disease among the working class in Paris who were too poor to afford proper medication. Helen smiled at the memory of her father nearly choking on his wine. It took 6 months of constant cajoling before her parents allowed her to stay with Stephanie in her gorgeous left-back apartment, an apartment which was always full of cigarette smoke, earnest hashish enlivened conversation. Paris had matured her. There was no doubt in my mind about that. In Paris, she finally broke free from the remnants of her childhood restraints. It was Stephanie who advised her not to expect too much from people if she was to avoid feeling let down when they failed to come up to her expectations. Discover their positive points, Stephanie had advised, and then you'll be able to come to terms with our negative ones. Helen had taken that advice, and for the most part it had worked. It certainly did, as far as Geoffrey was concerned. She and Geoffrey met at a hunt ball, and his final chiseled face, trim build and charm, and ready wit swept her off her feet. Geoffrey was one of the most eligible bachelors in the county, indeed in the country, and their engagement earned her the envy of unmarried girls and the dislike of their mothers. Thanks to Stephanie's advice, it had indeed been a successful marriage. Geoffrey's weak point was his lack of initiative, especially when it came to managing the family's chain of stores, which he inherited shortly before they were married. Geoffrey's father had a natural talent. He had built up the business from nothing, and by the time he died, it was worth a great deal of money. But under Geoffrey's easygoing management, it went steadily downhill. His sisters beseeched her to do something, but she refused, not wanting to belittle her husband in front of others. It was only after the third branch was sold that she realized she had to do something if she wasn't going to end up with two pennies to rub together. It was Stephanie who suggested that she asked Geoffrey to appoint her as director, a request that was granted without a moment's hesitation. Helen saw Geoffrey's total lack of complete self-confidence at a stormy meeting when the other directors ganged up against him, demanding a decision on the future of the Limerick branch. She saw the confusion in Geoffrey's eyes that darted from one director to the other as a pleading for help, and she was the only one who gave it by offering calm and gentle persuasion, making it seem that it was his decision to sell the Limerick branch. Despite what the others thought, it was Geoffrey who suggested that she assume the position of chairman and managing director. He did so because it enabled him to slip quietly into the background and devote more time to his obsessive love for golf. How those fuddy-duddies directors resented her, appalled at having to work under a woman. Helen smiled to herself, but of course it was a considerable charm and common sense that eventually won them over, and together they reversed the downward trend. Success, on the other hand, brought with it enemies who regarded her as a selfish, domineering bitch, but she refused to let that upset her. Helen smiled this time at the memory of Geoffrey telling her on his deathbed what a caring, understanding wife she had been. That pleased her, for deep down, she had been fond of Geoffrey. The sharp rap on the bedroom door roused her out of her reverie. From his expression, Helen could see that Thomas was in a sour mood. "Are you finished?" he had roughly, bending down for her breakfast tray. She nodded. "Checking for lunch," he said as he walked stiffly to the door. His rheumatism must be acting up again, Helen thought. With a sigh, she settled back against the pillows. Gracious, how he had changed. Her mind drifted back to the first time she saw him in the study being interviewed by Geoffrey for the position of chauffeur. His stunning good looks had stopped her in her tracks. He seemed so shy and innocent when answering Geoffrey's questions, but he'd been far from that in bed. Helen closed her eyes and smiled, thinking of the afternoon of energetic love-making in his room above the garage. Now, I think I'll leave that there until next extract. Bye-bye. Have a nice day.